Welcome to Lesson 5C, Polls, Polls, Polls. Pretend it's almost election time in the year 2144, and you're on the re-election staff of President Kathleen Smith. It's October 21st, so let me do my crazy mark, and then let's do this. It's October 21st, the election day is November 3rd, and that is approaching very quickly. Your job is to analyze the results of polls conducted by 3 different companies, and you're to report out to President Smith. Question number 1. After looking at the results, what information would you give President Smith about her chances of re-election, and which of the 3 polls should be given the most weight? Hit pause, write down a couple of thoughts, and then come back. Some things to consider. These polls, or this poll, was taken further back. The dates are in early October, and these dates are in mid-October, and that's where we are right now. The sample size, this is the smallest sample. These two are a bit larger, and then you see the results here. When a poll occurs and the size of the poll can impact the results. So it depends on what you want to tell President Smith. The older polls give a lower rating. The more recent polls give a better rating, and there are more people who have been were asked in the polls for their opinions. So it looks like it's getting better for the election, but you know, it still may be too close to say for sure. I've mentioned before that I think you should start like a glossary page or flashcards or sticky notes or something. Here is another word or set of words that you need to add to that list. We're going to understand what a weighted average is and how we use it. We're also going to be calculating those weighted averages, and we're going to use weighted averages to analyze and draw conclusions about data. Starting with question 2, disregarding sample size, calculate the mean of the results from the 3 polls, round to the nearest percent, and so based on these results, what are you going to tell the president? Hit pause, and I'll join you back at the first part where the chart was. I'll have that back up on the screen. What they were asking us to do on question 2 is to disregard anything else other than straight averaging. So I'll take my 45, 51, and 52, add those up, divide by 3, and it said add or round to the nearest percent. On my screen, I have 49.33%, so the nearest percent is going to be right there. So just a straight mean or average puts the president, the current president, at 49%. That's not a majority. This is a good time to go ahead and click pause and look at question 3 at least, and maybe question 3, what's just after it, and question 4. But at least do question 3. It says, let's consider which of the 3 polls are least and most reliable and therefore likely to be less or more important to the president. Reliability is a term used to communicate whether a poll or survey can be reproduced. In other words, reliability is a measure of precision. Again, something else to write down in your notes. Part A says, of the 3 polls, which may be the least reliable? And so looking at least reliable, this poll happened early in October, and this poll had the smallest sample size. And so since this had the lowest percentage, it is dragging the average, this 49%, it's dragging it down. But Part B said which polls may be more reliable and how could this affect our average? These 2 occurred more recently. These 2 have, especially this one, has a lot more people that were asked the question about who would you vote for. This one is still larger, 500 people larger than the other sample size. And these look more favorable. And these are larger, they're more recent, and they're pulling the averages up. Make sure you read through this information in the box that's just before question 4 You might want to go ahead and pause and read through it by yourself and make some notes. But I'll go ahead and read through it, and you can read with me or come back and read along. To make a statistical correction for reliability, polls are usually combined using weighted averages. Huge words to put in your notes. Weighted averages are averages that they're computed after assigning each quantity a weight. That's why it's called weighted average, that it identifies its relative importance. And each quantity is multiplied by its respective weight. So I want to underline that in a different color. It's going to get multiplied by its respective weight, and then the results are added. So make yourself notes that make sense about we're going to do some kind of multiplied something, and then we're going to be adding some stuff, and then there's even a cheater to put at the very end that when we get done, all of our weights, we need to verify that all of the weights come out to be 1 or 100%, which those are the same thing. So here again is the weighted average of how it's going to be calculated using a two-step procedure. Number one, we're going to multiply the weight. It says do not convert the poll percentage to a decimal. Just multiply it by the number. Then we're going to add all of those products, and the sum is called the weighted average. One last comment. The selection of weights is normally the result of advanced scientific analysis. In other words, they're going to give us the weights, and we just need to do this two-step process. Multiply some stuff and add some stuff. And we're going to call it weighted average. Make sure you hit pause. You go do question 4, and then come back and we'll talk about it together. It says in our particular poll, we're going to make a good guess about the weights based on the information that we have so far. Remember how poll 1 was taken early in October and the sample size was smaller than the other two? We're just going to give it a weight of 0.2 or 20%. But, and that's where we're writing it right here. But polls 2 and 3 were fairly similar. One did have more as a sample, but they're fairly simple, so let's give them 40% and 40%. And remember, our weights have to add up to be 1 or 100%. The polls and the weights are summarized in the table below. Then it asks us to use the two-step procedure to calculate the weighted average of the 3 polls using the given weights. Remember the two-step procedure. Multiply, add them up. This is a great question for the test. I won't explain how to calculate. You just have to remember weighted means I'm going to do 2 steps. First, I'm going to multiply, multiply, multiply. So I'm going to multiply the 45%. Remember, a while ago it said just go ahead and use 5 times 0.2, and we're getting 9%. I'm going to do the next one, 1 times 0.4, and I'm getting 20.4%. Finally, I'll do 2 times 0.4, and I'm getting 20.8%, and then I'm going to add these 3 together, because the 2 steps says multiply first and then add what you have. And if I'm adding a bunch of percents, when I get done, I'm still going to have percents. So now we're looking at a brand new number based on weighted averages. Now you've got something else you can go back and tell the president, hopeful for getting another term, is that, okay, now we're 50.2, we're at 2/10. That is the majority, but let's look at questions 5 and 6. I'm going to stay right here while you read through question 5, which says compare your results in questions number 2 and number 4. Remember in question number 2, that was where we just did a straight average and found that the president's, hopefully president-elect, the poll was looking at a 49% approval rating. When we did question 4, we looked at weights, and that put the president at 50.2. So it says on question 5, compare them, and does the advice you provide to the president change a whole lot if you use the weighted average? You could say sure, but you know, it's still not looking very good and it's not a significant difference. But which should be more accurate? And probably the one that is weighted should be more accurate since this less reliable poll, its value, its weight has been diminished. But then part C says, would you change anything, specifically considering that this last poll had a smaller sample size than the second poll? So maybe even that you use a 0.3 here and maybe a 0.5 here, because I believe that's the one that had like 2,000, 2,000 people participating in the poll, and maybe still leave this one at 0.2. We still add up to 1, but that gives the second poll a little bit more value because of the N, because of the number of participants. Looking at question 6, it starts asking again about spreadsheets. So I'm going to go on back to my math lab and click on, 5. And I've already got 3 tabs open, or 3 of the zip files open. I'm going to double click on the file itself, and then we're in 5C in class. So I'm going to use that spreadsheet. And then I have information about different polls, their results, and the weight that has been assigned to them by some statistical formula, which we are not privy to. We're just going to apply the weight that we are given. Question 6 says, use the spreadsheet to calculate the weighted average, use the information to advise the president, and report the weighted average in cell D17, which is going to be right down here. Save the spreadsheet, record result, how's the president doing, and then we're going to talk about question 7, which of the polls we think are most recent or largest sample size. For right now, we're going to practice. We can do this by hand and on our calculator, but we are going to go ahead and use the power of the Excel spreadsheet as long as we know what we're telling it, because remember, it only does what we tell it to do. So a weighted result would be that we're going to say equals. I want the information in B2 to be shift 8 multiplied times the information in C2. I'm going to hit return and I get a number. Remember, our little cheater here is to go ahead and drag it down just to the end of the polls, and we get all of these numbers. Now, the only thing is, it doesn't know that we really want this in percentages, and it's giving it to us in decimals. So I'm going to Control Z, get out of all of that, and go back to where I was and tell it, okay, wait, one more thing. One more thing. I want you, after you do that calculation, to multiply by 100 because I want to see this as a percentage. So now I have 2%. I like that better. So now I'm going to scroll down and let it fill in all of the blanks for all of the percentages. But the question on 6 says, let's do the complete weighted average down here at the bottom in cell D17. So I'm going to say equal, and I need it to sum. I needed to add up everything that's going right here from D2 colon all the way down to D16, close my parenthesis, and it should tell me or give me the sum of all of the weighted averages. And we get 40 and 1400%. So looking at that, you still don't have great news for the president, but it's still majority. That would win the election. Finally, question 7 says, which polls appear to be getting either being more recent or have the largest sample size, and why, and how does this affect your final answer? And if you start looking over here at the weights where you have like a 0.13, so CNN, NBC, and probably we got Newsweek. Oh, there's another one, CBS. Those are the 3 top polls. And those polls could be the most recent. For various reasons, they're getting more weight. They might have had a very large sample size. But question 7 writes something down because these polls play a larger role in calculating the weighted average than do the other polls. This concludes lesson 5C. Check your calendar, see if you have more lessons to do before our deadline at the end of this week.